Let's talk. Hey y'all, it's Mamaw, and today I'm in Columbus, Ohio, as you can see, COSI in the background, with Colonel Adam Miller, U.S. Army retired, who's running for Ohio Congressional seat in District 15. How you doing, Colonel? Did I get it all right?
You got it. Great. Good to see you, Mamaw. Good to see you. Always good to be in the presence.
So, as I was telling Colonel Miller, I had all of these questions ready to go, and then every day the taco changes something, so we're just going to kind of freewheel it today with our Constitution. All right, tell us a little bit about you before we get started.
Oh my goodness. So gracious of you to come up. And
yeah, Mamaw don't do this for everybody.
This is great, and you may not know it, but we're sitting here in an area of Columbus that has been kind of renamed Franklinton, but for all of us who are from here, it's called the Bottoms. This is where the Miller family started 120 years ago, about a half mile, hit a baseball, as my dad would say, right over there at Yale Avenue. And I think they were able to afford that as a family that had moved here from Richwood, Ohio, and from LaRue, Ohio, rural, poor farming areas. They weren't wealthy because you could probably get a house on Yale Avenue very inexpensively because you would be flooded out about every 10 years. So when people talk about the flood wall, which is just behind us, you can't see it from here, one of the few examples I can cite of good bipartisan congressional work for the West Side that got done. The flooding here was very real for our families because it just destroyed everything, the businesses, the restaurants, parks, everything that we would build about every 10 to 15 years would get flooded out. So when I grew up and my great-grandma was watching me, she would talk about the flood and how tough it was and how she barely escaped but for a deputy sheriff in a canoe. And this is 1913, and thank goodness that the sheriff went back down one more time. He literally said, "Mrs. Miller, are you up there?" And she had I'm glad he made it. And, so for me, my interest in community building from the ground up started at my great-grandmother's knee, and hearing about her life from literally born in 1890, horse and buggy, and a family from deep southern Ohio, Johnson's Holler, near Portsmouth, New Boston, and learning the values of those communities, family, faith, friends. That matters here in Ohio.
And so you're running, now this has been a newly gerrymandered district.
This is the most gerrymandered seat in the United States. And just think about that. What does that say? So I'm going to run, and I used to run in high school, I used to run at Ohio State. I'm going to run a half mile in a couple weeks out near Springfield, and I'm going to run in 4 congressional districts in 3 minutes. And if you don't think that isn't gerrymandered, you're not paying attention.
Yeah, that is insane.
It's just, we have got to stop letting the political infrastructure pick voters instead of letting regular people choose their representatives.
Well, as you know, in what I had sent you of what the Mamaw's porch community came up with in our voting thing, gerrymandering was right up at the top as far as we've really got to institute a new voting rights.
The John Lewis Voting Rights Act is a big step forward in the right direction in enhancing other protections, not just for voting, but for voting registration, for election oversight. And here's the thing that drives me crazy. We spent hundreds of thousands of dollars, tens of millions of dollars, to run the fairest, freest election Afghanistan had ever had. And we won't spend more than $5 to have fair and open elections in our states? That's how upside down Bass-ackwards is the term we use in the bottoms.
Bass-ackwards.
That this Congress has gotten when they are so focused on protecting their fiefdoms. We need something better. So for me, it started as being a teacher. I saw an opportunity to contribute as a coach, as a teacher. I love that work. Taught in Columbus, taught in some of the suburbs surrounding Central Ohio, and was able to convert my passion for coaching and athletics and language and reading and speaking into working with middle school kids. And folks say, well, how many combat tours have you had, Colonel? I say 3. One was in the middle schools, 2 overseas. And they say, what are you talking? I said, if you've taught in middle school, it's just the kids are at the point in their life where they're changing, and they know they're changing, and they know they don't like it. And,
yeah,
but I love those. Working with kids is really my lifetime passion. And
well, what made you join the military?
It was a family thing. And, I saw the opportunity to contribute. My great-grandfather, my grandfather, my dad. My grandfather is a Band of Brothers paratrooper replacement. And I got to watch that show with Grandpa before he
wonderful.
Crossed the Rainbow Bridge. And I asked him, was that the way it was? Was there really that much difference between one regiment and another in the 82nd? And he said, all the difference in the world. Absolutely.
His dad was in Papa's dad was in the Army Air Corps and was a ball turret gunner and survived 13 missions.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So, from being a toddler, looking around my grandparents' house on Sundays after church, there for Sunday supper, and seeing this uniform, this gray uniform with all these stripes and all of these ribbons and wings, and say, what's that? And my grandpa just would say, oh, that's just what I wore in the war, Budge. But as I got older and saw the contribution he made and saw how difficult it was for him to talk about the time he spent. He was a replacement, so he came in late 1944, the back end of the Battle of the Bulge, the largest operation ever. The crossing of the Rhine was actually 3 American airborne divisions, the most we've ever had, and that his experiences liberating concentration camps and occupying Germany always stayed with him, and he would say, we are going to use every single dollar we have here and appreciate what we have, because I've seen real war and death and destruction, and we're never going to have that again. So he would be so upset, my grandfather, as a lifelong Republican, to see the destruction of the American institutions, the hand-waving at the Constitution, the hand-waving at the court system that we're seeing now in this administration.
Well, I'm stressing to everyone, we still have guardrails. We still have a few in the judiciary. We have a few Republican congressmen that are beginning to stand up, and Tom Tillis really showed us yesterday. But explain what true congressional oversight would mean to this administration.
Something they don't want. Real oversight is when the administration will have to be transparent with us, with the members of Congress, not just about what they've already done, but about their planning and their intentions. One of the most important jobs I had in the JAG Corps was looking at our plans for military operations. And that's one of the things they train you to do. Is the operation as proposed legal with the United States law? Is it legal with all the treaties with our allies and partners? Is it funded? Does it have an appropriation source? And to know that everything is going to be looked at multiple layers to make sure it's constitutional, legal, ethical, and moral, that gives you confidence that you can perform the operation successfully. What I don't like about the way this administration is handling it is having purged all of the lawyers and the people who do compliance work, all of the folks who do the financial accounting, getting rid of all the inspector generals, all of the institutional oversight. you're really operating in the dark. And the United States succeeds because we're operating in the light. We want people to know what we're capable of. We want people to know what we can do to make the world freer. We don't want to hide in the dark.
Well, come Saturday, I'm supposed to speak at an event, and they initially had it war crimes. And I said, no, we're against war. But there were no war crimes. That's why I try to explain to people what we did in Venezuela and the Caribbean, because we're not in a declared war.
Yeah.
And only Congress can declare that war, even though the War Powers Act desperately needs to be tightened
Desperately needs amending. And we've got an article, we've got the founder's genius of the balance, the checks and balances between the executive, Article 1, and Congressional. You've got that balance. And you read Madison, and you read, well, I was reading Washington the other day, and General Washington's letters talking about his desire for an orderly, principled force that would be better than the force that he served with in the British Army. You know, people forget that Washington served General Braddock very, very ably and very well. And Washington was very clear about his desire for military justice and for justice to be fair and transparent, so that we would have a standing force that would be the military that would earn the respect of all the people, not just the gentry landowners, but every person in the United States. So when I go to Mount Vernon, that's where I went after I got back from Afghanistan, and just reconnect with Washington's vision for our country, it's very powerful. So when I think of Congress and the oversight, I think practical things, special investigative offices to make sure that if we're going to spend $10 billion on oil in Venezuela and Colombia and who knows else, wherever we're going to spend it, it's going to be done in a way that our taxpayers will have transparency and oversight, and it won't be done in secret.
Oh, you don't think that it should just go in the president's slush fund?
And here's the real concern I hear from folks in places like Asheville, Ohio, Hillsborough, Ohio. They're seeing corruption on the local level. They said, I got a meeting notice Sunday night for a Monday emergency meeting on a data center that I didn't even know about.
And Portsmouth's having the same issue.
How could it be that the township or the council is considering a gazillion-dollar tax abatement and all of these things, and all the documents are pre-planned, but there hasn't been one meeting or one open discussion? So we really need to return to that transparency and that public process where people feel like not just that they're heard, but they have input.
One of the other issues that we've had, getting back to voting rights, is the repeal of Citizens United and codifying bodily autonomy.
Oh my.
So where's your stance on those issues?
If you look back at Supreme Court decisions, and you can think of the worst 5 Supreme Court decisions, the decisions we've had in the last 20 years have really been bad for our country and for our Constitution. Ending Citizens United and restoring bodily autonomy and restoring the dignity of the individual personhood are so important. The corruption that you've seen in our political system in terms of the exorbitant, extraordinary $1 billion of corporate donations into our races. I mean, you saw it last year. You saw a race for 2 years ago, the United States Senate. Instead of having both points of view, we used to have, equal access, we saw lies and mischaracterizations of facts.
And never checked.
And no fact check. And because of these court decisions, and in Ohio, we went a step further in the wrong direction, and we got rid of the Elections Commission that was actually holding hearings. So if you were going to put something on an ad, you had to show up and show what it to be able to defend it as reasonably accurate. And now, if you don't have that, people are just lying.
Well, and ballot language is so
awful.
Confusing.
When I saw the misinterpretation of the gerrymandering reform that the GOP was using to trick people, I knew that it was going to be a problem, because the polling is really clear. 75-80% of our country want fair elections, want elections that are relatively balanced, so there's a contest between the parties. They don't want one-party government of our state. They never have. But when I saw that, I knew we were going to have a problem.
Well, on the gerrymandering issue, there was signage that was incorrect.
It was deliberately false.
And people would argue with me, no, we don't want gerrymandering. I said, if you vote that way, you are telling them to. So, yeah, it really needs...
And we saw the chair of the Republican Party in triumph talking about he had tricked Ohio into voting the wrong way by the misleading signs. And that's why it's really important that as we go forward, if you're running for office, candidates have got to remind people, fact check, fact check, fact check.
Well, Ohio used to be one of the crown jewels and the gateway to any kind of technology and education. I think it's a shock to people to realize we're in the bottom 5 in a lot of things now. The school voucher system, which started on the East Coast, it's been like a wave. I was out speaking in Idaho. They're being hit with the same thing, and school vouchers passed. What is a school voucher system going to do to rural America?
The voucher system has the potential to pull that last base of resources for teachers, for parents, and for kids to learn. And when I talk to superintendents, when I talk to teachers, I say, what keeps you up at night? They say, we are 3 years behind. The COVID pandemic and the changes we had to make, the adjustments we had to make, and now we're finally back to in-person. And so many of our students, particularly students with special needs, are years behind. And the lack of socialization is now coming up, and you're seeing schools dealing with a lot of challenges for behaviors. So when you pull more money away from the public schools and you just make it harder and harder, almost impossible for them to perform their basic mission, it's going down the wrong track. So this next Congress, and one of the really significant things that I'm going to have a chance to do if the voters hire me, is to reauthorize the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. The Elementary and Secondary Education Act has to be refigured to address the enormous challenges we have with special needs, with class size, and with the inability to deal with emerging technologies and larger systems, so that instead of having so many different ways, we really ought to look at what states like North Carolina are doing. I look at Mecklenburg and those counties in Charlotte, and I see what they're doing to get in front of problems because they've got county resources. They still have the individual district, but they're able to do preschool and childcare and all of those things that we know help children learn because they're collaborating. So the vouchers are an attack on collaboration that has to be stopped.
Well, getting back to helping children learn. From an administration that claims to be so pro-life, I am concerned about food insecurity nationwide, internationally, now that we've done away with USAID. The slashing of SNAP benefits. Now he's penalizing certain states even more so than what we are.
Without any justification.
So how do we tighten that up in the Congress to take that authority away from the president? Because this funding's already been
cut.
It's already been approved, and now he's withholding it because food insecurity, at least in the southeastern Ohio area I live in, is a very real problem, and children cannot learn if they are hungry.
Children can't learn, and parents can't live their lives if you don't know where the next meal's coming from. I was in Highland County yesterday, and seeing some folks there deal with the food deserts that they have, and you're out in Bright Local, you're in Fayetteville Perry, you're in a very difficult situation, and there just aren't enough opportunities to buy groceries. And the guy came out and he said the issue is, before the tariffs, in the beginning of the administration, it was just the back walls that were seeing the price increases, but now it's the front.
It's everywhere.
It's what I put out for people because I know they want milk, I know they want eggs, I know they're here to get their bread. So this administration is literally starving us to death. We can't afford to buy groceries. We can't afford to pay utility bills. And the power companies say, well, we'll just put you on a payment plan. And they leave out some of the details that if you're on a payment plan, the amount's going to be different. But at the federal level, instead of getting into these unsolvable, intractable debates over the big omnibus, we need to break it into parts and force the Republican leadership to deal with individual food security legislation. Let's pass the grocery bill. Let's pass the child care bill. You're really against affordable groceries? You're really against organic farms in the cities? You're against farmers being able to refinance the equipment? Most of the farmers in my district, and outside Piqua, outside Highland, right near a place called Lynchburg.
No, exactly.
That equipment is equipment that was purchased after the 85 Farm Aid. So you got folks with 45-year equipment, and you can't expect them to get better yields. And then you're going to throw on tariffs and just wipe them out and then try to pay them off with a specialty crop check every 4 months.
And it's a very minimal check.
It needs a change.
Well, those of us Army officers, you know, you study a lot about warfare and tactics, which even old Mamaw did. And this reminds me of siege warfare. So how you bring a population to its knees is you take away food security. You make it so that only the warlord can provide for you.
Almost a feudal society.
And if all else fails, you bludgeon them to their knees, like what happened in Minnesota. We've all watched that video over and over. I am begging people to stay peaceful. We're going to start having protests out here. As a JAG officer, as an attorney, as what you have seen there, what can we do to hold accountable these masked bandits who, in my estimation, and I was in law enforcement, are nothing better than the brown shirts in Weimar, Germany?
The thugs, the thuggish behavior that we're seeing from DHS. So 3 things. Secretary Noem needs to
impeached.
She needs to resign. She has lost the confidence of the United States government.
She never had our confidence.
If she ever had it.
Yeah.
She needs to go.
Play Barbie's what I call her.
When you have such an unqualified person in such an important position, I mean, I remember after 9/11, the high hopes that we had for defending the homeland and their bipartisan consensus to create a place where all of the threat assessments would come in real time, so we wouldn't have a situation like we had before where Condoleezza Rice had a memo saying Al-Qaeda attack imminent and didn't think it was really imminent.
Yeah.
We have to have that. So all of those things that we agreed on, now we have an administration that's gone way, way, way out of scope. And Lisa, as Army officers, what are we always told when we're going to deploy? Focus on the mission. Stay within your lane. And to see this kind of mission creep and to get them moving way beyond the scope of their mission, it's a huge issue. So today, this afternoon, I'm going to be at the federal building calling for a stand down. ICE should stand down any operation that does not have a direct correlation to their legal statutory mission.
Well, it's even...
We need a stand down, and we need a total reassessment of training, because if you did a FOIA request of ICE today and you said, I'm going to make a Freedom of Information Act request for training slides for internal operations within the United States, I think I know how that response would come. There isn't any.
Well, it's going to get even better. It used to be a 6-month training program, and you already had to have passed some type of marshal's training or local law enforcement training to get into ICE, and then it was a 6-month training program. It is now 47 days because they chose the number 47 to comply with Donald Trump being the 47th president.
Wow.
Those thugs are out there, the masked bandits, with 47 days training and put on the job before their security clearances come in. And that's a fact. You look it up.
It's terrible.
I was appalled.
That kind of shake and bake training was something that when we found out at Fort Bragg back in the early 2000s that some of the schoolhouses were pushing soldiers through just to get them over to Green Ramp and get them on a plane and get them overseas, we stopped those deployments. We literally halted major deployments because we were not going to allow troops to be put in positions of responsibility with loaded weapons without the proper training. And when I see the kinds of horrific scenes and horrific sounds that show that it almost suggests that there was an an operations order to engage in an illegal manner with everyday people. Why in the world, if your mission is border enforcement and customs enforcement, you shouldn't be following $80,000 SUVs in Minnetonka, creating problems and taking an aggressive attack on civilians.
And just not even having any de-escalation training and telling people they can't video, to push back. They are agitating on purpose.
Yes, even in combat. Even when I was walking outside the PRT in Afghanistan in 2004, you're always trained to assess a situation individually. And if you see a dangerous situation,
how can you de-escalate?
How can I de-escalate? And weapons down, weapons on safe, eye contact clearly with the other party so they see. And I have seen de-escalation work. And when a number of us running for Congress and members of Congress, Democrats, Pat Ryan, Jason Crow, folks who've served in combat, have said, why isn't there any accountability? Why are we letting this happen? We need to do more. So I'm not just calling for the stand down, but I'm calling for GAO to do a special investigation of the funding that ICE is receiving, because if ICE is using officers in a way that's outside the scope of their funding, that's a very serious Anti-Deficiency Act violation.
They absolutely are. But let's get on to, while we're talking military, as a retired officer, which I am not, thank God, I did my time, got out. But I have very near and dear friends who are retirees. One got recalled twice. She said, am I ever going to get to retire? How are we justifying? My guess is we have at least 600,000 current retired military officers. And what we're saying is that 600,000 retired military officers cannot speak their mind, cannot state the obvious, or that you can be recalled and demoted in rank and we're going to take part of your retirement, and oh, by the way, we don't care that you're a United States Senator.
It's unprecedented. It's unprecedented in the history of the United States. One of the most important positions you have as a retired officer, as a retired soldier, is to represent the values of the military service, that loyalty, that steadfast support for the mission and belief in our Constitution. And I tell you, I've gotten a lot of outreach from folks still in uniform saying, is there, what can I do? I'm in uniform and I'm seeing these terrible situations, and the advice that I'm giving, and I know others are giving, is if you ask for your advice in a meeting, give the advice based on the law and then follow up in writing. Mm-hmm. Because it's harder to ignore the law when it's in writing. And you may lose your position. You may not get a great evaluation. You may not get top blocked on your eval. And that commander may find somebody else, but you keep your integrity. And the integrity of the law, the Constitution, is so important. Make that position known. So I have great confidence in those serving now, because they can read the law and they're used. This new generation reminds me of my grandfather's greatest generation. They've served 3 or 4 times overseas. Mm-hmm. They're tough. They're resilient. The men and women who fought and suffered for our country and are now in senior positions of responsibility, they have the ethical compass that we don't see in Congress or the White House.
Well, when I interviewed Brian Bangs, Ty Pinkins, and even Amy McGrath, even though she wasn't in the JAG Corps, they said, if they do this, they are literally going to have the streets full of retirees.
There is such a commonality of all of us, and it's just to the right is the National Military Museum for Veterans, and that's where our Franklin County Veterans Memorial has sat for over 100 years. One of the oldest banners in there is from the GAR, the Grand Army of the Republic, and the war against the Spanish. So when I think of the shared history and the shared sacrifice, for this Congress to go against veterans like that, but it doesn't surprise me because they cut all the VA medical support last year. They would rather try to score political points and downsize VA hospitals and VA clinics and close VA services in places like Chillicothe and the rural parts of our state where we have over 40% of veterans who live in those counties. And to say, well, you're going to have to drive 3 hours now, or you'll have to wait on a 7 a.m. pickup from Uber to get you to an appointment. It doesn't surprise me because this administration turned their back on veterans. And my opponent, the Republican, Mr. Kerry, voted to cut the PACT Act. He gets so frustrated with me when I say that, and I say, Mike, you voted to pass the law, but then the next week you voted to gut all of those who are going to implement the 2 million new claims. So you're actually going to make it longer and harder for Vietnam vets who are in the front of that line, who are struggling with Agent Orange and exposure to toxic chemicals. Are you trying to make mental health for veterans worse? That's what you're doing when you're voting for something and then taking it away in the same breath. So that's my, people say, what do you have against Kerry? I say, you are failing in your responsibility to represent everybody when you're not upholding the law.
To me, when the president of all people, and it's not that I think every president should be in the military, that's not the point, but for the cowardice that he showed to get out of the draft at an age when they were drafting, and then to believe that the military are now his play toys like they're the little plastic green men, and look, mommy, watch me blow this up, just nauseates me because my son has a traumatic brain injury from serving this country. It is serious. It is not a matter of a damn headache. No. Calvin was 17 years old when he was in Vietnam.
Wow.
And then Cadet Bone Spurs to, not want Tammy Duckworth at a formal thing because people didn't want to see that. Really? And you're telling me that you support veterans?
This administration has been the worst administration for Veterans Affairs we've ever seen. There's nothing like it.
Those are Fox people.
I can't give you.
Thumbs up there.
I can't give you an example or a comparative, but I can make it plain this way. In all of our countries that we serve with, the British Army, German military, all of our allies, they have a chart. Here were the veterans benefits that you signed up for when you swore the oath. And they make sure that you get the same benefits after you retired or after your service is over than what you signed up for. And we all took that as gospel here because we're in the United States, and of course we're going to have the same benefits when we swore our oath and when we signed our first enlistment. But to see this Congress say, well, I'd rather take more trips overseas, I'd rather build more golf courses, I'd rather give more billionaire corporate giveaways, I'd rather make it better for oil companies, and we'll get to the veterans when the national debt is at $50 trillion. I mean, it's unbelievable how irresponsible it is.
But you also just named countries that have universal health care, so it's easier to do that. And
there you go.
We have a woman down home that just said, I got my first bill, $2,000 a month.
Oh my God. So more than 400% probably.
So how in the hell?
How are they going to afford anything?
Yeah, so
They're not.
She's not.
And she's going to go to an emergency room.
Absolutely.
But she's going to have a hard time because this administration's attack on rural health care has closed the last rural systems out there. Premier Health is on life support pardon the pun,
And we've got
in my district.
We've got 2 smaller things, so that's going to really get them too.
But to your point, you don't say you support veterans, but then cut all the funding for helmets to hard hats. So my opponent has cut the funding for all of the reintegration programs that were so needed that we said after Desert Storm we mobilized 500,000 men and women, and they came back different. We need to do something to help people re-enter their lives and to help them reintegrate. And then after the surge and the desert, all of those conflicts in Afghanistan and Iraq, to cut the workforce development and just say to folks dealing with trauma and stress, figure it out, go to a website, it's wrong. It's un-American. It's criminal negligence. And that's one of the things that I'm going to focus on. And when I met with the ranking member for the Veterans Committee, the congressman from Louisville, Kentucky, he said, we don't have anybody from Ohio on our Veterans Committee in Congress. I said, you got to be kidding me. He said, no, we need someone from Ohio. You got the 5th or 6th largest population of military. He said, I'm going to help you get elected because I want to see someone who has a passion for veterans. So one of the first things I did when I got off active duty the first time was look for ways to help families reintegrate. And then I met Supreme Court Justice, Republican Justice Eve Stratton, who was really concerned about the impact of stress and trauma on military families. And we created, it's called Operation Legal Help Ohio, a free legal service for veterans all over our state. And literally just on the back of a piece of paper saying, let's work together. Let's bring the Veteran Service Commissions. Let's bring the legislature. Let's bring the law school clinics together. And let's ask the firms and providers if you would volunteer time for veterans. And we serve thousands of people.
Well, one of the things I did in our county is got a grant approved. Actually, we only got half of the grant because Donald Trump canceled half of it. That's a whole nother thing. But we've got a system now, a computerized system. We get veterans in the system, can shoot right to the VA. They sign a release, and so we're letting them know these are the veterans that are coming through the court system.
Yeah, it's the docket, the vet's docket.
Right, and it's the municipal level, so let's help them now before it gets any worse. And so it's been very effective, and we're the only county in the area down there that has it. Now we have a veterans court in Athens County. Okay. But in Jackson County, we're the only ones that have integrated into.
Well, here's an opportunity that we can share with all your viewers today. One of the things that I'm most proud of in my State House time, 8 years, was creation of the Veteran Service Fund. This is a large trust that has been created out of the profits from Ohio's sports betting. So to get that consensus to create a law for sports betting, the Republican leadership needed Democratic votes, and I said, well, you guys cut all the VA programs, you cut all the veteran service programs. If you want our support for betting, let's reinstate money for after-school programs for kids, and let's create a service fund for veterans across the state. And I was so pleased we could get to a bipartisan consensus. So out of House Bill 29 in the General Assembly before, we created this fund, and you would be surprised how much money we have, because sports gaming in Ohio has just continued to grow. So that is a big nest egg. It's under the Ohio Department of Veteran Services. General Harris now, Director Harris, has a good nest egg. So I hope people at the county level will start asking General Harris for help, because that was our intent, that we would seed that money to help veterans and military families, regardless of where you live. That was the idea. We looked at other states, and Iowa was one of the states that set up a veterans fund. And they said we had to do it because in Iowa they were doing veterans in 99 counties, 99 different ways. And I said, boy, that sounds familiar to me. Let's learn. And Iowa said the mistake we made was we didn't put enough in the initial seed money so the trust would grow. So they said if you have a chance to seed your veterans fund, you're going to be able to do a lot of good. And I look at what we're doing at the county level for suicide prevention. I look at Save a Warrior, an organization down in Hillsborough where I was yesterday. I look at all the individual programs that are out there to help veterans reintegrate, help them deal with stress, and I see an opportunity to help them through the Veterans Service Fund.
Absolutely. That would be great. Well, so what is your biggest concern, the number one concern when you get into Washington?
We've got to change the culture. We've got to create that back and forth so that regardless of the district that you represent, Republican, Democrat, Independent, anywhere you are in that spectrum, we have 438 people that are working together for the good of everybody.
Well, that's what I tell all of my viewers is the reason I'm spotlighting all over the country is once you're there, you actually are doing work for everybody in the country. I mean, you represent your constituents, but every vote you make affects all of us.
There was a meeting when I was elected in 2017. It was a prayer breakfast, and I went to the prayer breakfast with the Republicans, and there were only two of us, Democrats, at the prayer breakfast. And it created an opportunity for us to begin to know each other and understand what was going on in each other's lives and each other's families. And it turned out that both the Republican chair and I had lost children. And when you've been through that kind of trauma, or you've had family members suffer with addiction and recovery, and I've been public about my brother's lifelong struggle with alcohol and addiction, and how hard it was for him once he finally was able to live sober to get to that next level of sustained recovery. We found common ground. And it was really interesting. People would say, why are you going to a meeting with Senator so-and-so? He opposes us on 90% of the bills. And I said, Senator Hoagland and I both served in the same theater of operation. He was on a SEAL team. I was with the Army. And we want to do something to deal with traumatic brain injury and post-combat stress. And if we can work together to improve outcomes, we're going to work together. So I know in my heart we can work together.
And we used to always be that way. It used to be there really wasn't collectively that much difference. And I tell people I don't have problems at all with a true conservative. What bothers me now is how shocked people are at the plethora of military people. They say they're Democratic. Well, yeah. When you've had to sit down and you realize that the PFC in your unit needs those food stamps, and his wife can't get a job, and they can't.
The AGR working at the National
and you
Guard
have to work with all of that.
Hasn't been paid in 60 days and is being asked to show up and run the Signal Battalion and run the National Guard Armory without any sure so when they're going to get paid or what care they're going to have. We've got to work together. So
got to.
That's really important, is people like me who've worked in a bipartisan way can again, the Republicans that I work with said, well, will you support this cut on public transportation so we can pay? I said, no. So, I'm proud. I've never voted for a transportation budget here that cut public transportation. I said, for us to fail to pass a public transit budget, for us to ignore the billions of dollars of transportation infrastructure money, so now Indianapolis and Denver are eating our lunch with public transit dollars, and they've got child care, they've got affordable housing, all those things. No, we need to work with our counterparts to get things done.
Rural Ohio desperately needs mass transit to get people to work.
Not just last mile, but first mile. We don't have the transit in rural Ohio. We don't have affordable housing. We don't have wellness. When I meet with folks at the senior center, and I've met with folks at the senior center in Fayette County and Miami County, and I say, they said, I'm lonely. I would love to connect with family. So we supported something in Ohio that was a pilot based on what Tennessee did, called Tennessee Cares. And it was a way for seniors to connect, not just with behavioral health and wellness, but connect with volunteers who said, I lost my grandmother. I would love to have a relationship with a person who can fill that role for me. And we asked the Tennessee director of their behavioral health program. How much did it cost you to get all through the state? East Tennessee, Johnson City, Bristol, Memphis. He said, oh, it was about $500,000. Our mouths dropped. You were able to do a statewide program in rural Tennessee, in East Tennessee, and the cities for $500,000? Okay. And I looked at my colleagues on the Ohio Finance Committee. I said, is anybody else clear on why we need to do this? We need to do that. And that kind of investment in senior wellness, when we know seniors can't afford the $1 million buy-ins that these retirement centers are charging, and they say they'll pay it back to you over time. Right. We need to accept the reality that people are retiring in place where they live, where they're near their kids, where they grew up, and make it more feasible for them to stay connected. That's a big priority for us. No one's talking about the senior mental health crisis that we have.
And it's loneliness. And I laugh when I look at the demographics by 100,000 followers. It's primarily women and men over 55. And then my second largest demographic are people under 25.
Wow.
And it's like they don't have grandparents.
That's what the research showed in Tennessee. The other thing I'm doing roundtables all over the district. Troy, we had a really interesting roundtable. In Washington Courthouse, we had a roundtable in Hillsborough. And I'm asking working women, 30 and 50, tell me what you're facing. What are your concerns?
Kids and parents.
And themselves. And one woman in Miami County said it this way: I'm on a treadmill that never stops. My husband is in the Guard. He's been in the Guard since we met. He's different. He's got his issues. I've got to help him deal with it. And if people wonder the average number of deployments for our MP units in the Ohio National Guard, it's 6. It's unbelievable. So think about that. And she said, and then I've got my parents. And then I've got my kids with their special needs. And she said, I support everything we have for the kids, and I support the programs for my husband and his reintegration, but I need something for me to help me connect to wellness, to help me get off that treadmill, to help me deal with the cascade of events that never seems to stop. So that's a priority. We need the Mental Health Expansion Act in our country, Lisa. So
are we going to make them professionals, or did you run that past Linda McMahon?
Oh my. Maybe the second least qualified administrator in our country.
My mind is blown, and that's why I started my nurse series. We're saying that teachers, counselors, social workers are now no longer professionals.
Nurses.
And nurses.
If you're trying to attack 80% of the United States working families, that's how you would do it. We're not going to stand for that. And the bipartisan consensus that exists for mental health in the states, I've seen it. It's real. When I would go to the state meetings with other legislators, and we would all list our top 3 issues: jobs, healthcare, mental health, affordability. Being in Congress gives you a chance to remind those folks who represent those parts of the country, Wyoming, Idaho, Western Missouri, you're really not for mental health. You represent Springfield and the Ozarks, Lake Osage, but you're not for mental health. You might want to reconsider.
Yeah.
So I see an opportunity to bring people together, not by calling each other names, but by focusing on what's good for their families that they represent. That's my approach. It worked here in the State House. It's going to work on Capitol Hill.
Oh, absolutely it will. We just got to have the mindset to do it. So I have questions. What's your favorite movie?
My favorite movie is The Music Man. Don't tell my troops.
Now we know.
Don't tell my troops. The Music Man. My wife and I can watch that. I have a family that loves to sing, and Shirley Jones and Robert Preston. And if you love music and you love instrumental music and marching bands, yes, I'm a marching band geek. How can you not love the Music Man?
See, I'm a history nerd. How I knew that Calvin and I were meant to be together is my favorite movie was Shenandoah with Jimmy Stewart.
There
so
you go.
was his.
There you go. if I had a close second, it would be It's a Wonderful Life.
Oh yeah.
That's my wife's.
Classic.
That's my wife's favorite movie.
Not the colorized version.
No.
It has to be black
and
and
white.
white.
Bedford
Okay.
Falls.
There you go. Favorite song?
America the Beautiful.
Outstanding choice. All right.
We sing America the Beautiful at our Hilltop Kiwanis meetings every week.
That is
And
cool.
Our Hilltop Kiwanis, I was a few minutes late for our meeting today because we're doing our grant appropriations for the year. Started in September 1945. World War II vets who are back home and wanted to see the West Side start to grow in a positive direction. My great-grandfather's brother, Ken Miller, who was the community liaison for the Columbus Police, was one of the founders of that Kiwanis. And when you go to those meetings and you see you have a chance to make that impact, it's powerful.
When we get off record here, I will play for you a combat veteran singing the Star Spangled Banner.
That's very cool.
That's what I tell people. You just don't understand that song unless you've heard a combat veteran sing it.
Yeah, people ask me, I'm so concerned. I've never been in politics before. I don't understand how can I make a difference? You can make a difference by organizing your neighborhood, by going to your neighbors and asking them, are you registered to vote? Do you know where your voting polling place is? Are you following the bills that are passed? Are you paying attention? Just organizing your block, helping people that you go to church with understand what's happening in that community. Those are ways you can connect with people.
Well, my porch community are already organizing amongst themselves to get people to the polls, which is huge because they've been shunned away. And now with the tightening of the mail-in ballots and the time frame, they're going to take each other, which I think is great. So how can people contribute and help and participate in your campaign?
Anyone who would like to see Congress return to the people can contribute. It's adammillerforcongress.org. We'll give you a link. And another thing we've done that I'm very excited about.
And it's at the letter 4 or F-O-R-E?
F-O-R, old school. adammillerforcongress.org. And I'm part of a group of veterans, not career politicians, people who got into public service, elected service late in their career. I was age 50. We kind of have banded together and have created it's called vetsrising.us.
Mm-hmm.
Vetsrising.us is a political committee to support other Democratic veterans running for national office, Senate or House.
Mm-hmm.
So there are a couple ways that people can get involved. And we believe that as veterans, as folks who've served and stood in front of formations, we knew that everybody in that formation has a different viewpoint on things, but we all have the same flag. We all work together for the same Constitution.
Well, and the other thing is, Calvin and I have talked about it quite a bit. From the time he was 17, I was 19 on. I took this oath quite seriously. And regardless of what some people have tried to argue, it was for my life.
Yeah.
It was to this is the document that says we all agree to this social experiment.
When I was overseas, serving in a very difficult part of Afghanistan, you don't see the U.S. flag very often. You don't see schools or any of that. But when we asked the Afghans, what can we do to help you get rid of terrorism and help you take your country forward, they would say the same thing. We want freedom. We want education for all of our kids. Thank you for helping us educate all of our kids, our men, women, our boys and girls. So I think that this administration's cynical approach and getting rid of economic aid, getting rid of all of the things that the United States can do to help level the playing field. And, I think there's a correlation where there is balanced educational aid and medical aid and NGOs are supporting a country, corruption in that country goes down and terrorism recedes. So it's really dangerous what this administration is doing by pulling back all of our diplomatic presence and using the military as a one-size-fits-all. And, you know, we've never been the world's policeman, and we need to stop it. So one of the first things we're going to do when the Democrats take back the House and Senate is codify the authority and the limits placed on the executive to use the military.
Yes.
Congress declares wars, the president does not.
And my final question is, will you promise when you get in there in 2027 we can have hearings with Jack Smith out in the open?
There's so much transparency that needs to occur. It's another part of a long list of things that we need to do. Thank you so much for the opportunity to meet you today.
Thank you very much.